They mocked her, pointing at the shack she called home, their laughter echoing as if her pain was entertainment. To them, she was just a divorced mom who had lost everything, forgotten, invisible, and destined to struggle forever. But what no one knew was that the very next day, a single encounter with a stranger would alter her life in ways that no one could have imagined. This isn't just a story of humiliation. It's about resilience, hope, and the shocking twist that turned despair into redemption. Before we dive into this powerful journey, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Stories like this one will keep you hooked until the very last second. The rain leaked through the roof again. Emma placed another rusted pot under the drip, listening to the steady rhythm of water hitting metal. Her daughter, Lily, huddled under a blanket on the worn-out couch, sketching quietly by the dim glow of a lantern. The shack smelled of damp wood and smoke from the tiny stove that barely heated the single room they called home. It was nothing like the life Emma once knew. A life with a husband, a steady job, and a roof that didn't cave in every winter storm. But that life was gone. After the divorce, her ex-husband had walked away with the house, the savings, and the car. All Emma had left was Lily and a crumbling shack on the edge of town, inherited from her grandfather decades ago. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Or so she reminded herself every night when the laughter of neighbors carried across the dirt road. That laughter returned again now, faint but cutting. A group of teenagers passed by outside, their voices mocking. "Look at that place. More like a chicken coop than a house." Another laughed, adding, "No wonder her husband left her. Who'd stay in there?" Their cruel words echoed long after their footsteps faded. Emma's chest tightened, but she kept her face steady for Lily. "Don't listen," she whispered, tucking a strand of hair behind her daughter's ear. "This is just a stop on our way to something better." Lily nodded, though her eyes lingered on the cracked walls. She was 12, old enough to understand the difference between what they had and what other kids had. Old enough to feel the sting of being different. The next morning, Emma rose before dawn, bundling herself in her coat against the chill. She worked double shifts cleaning offices, her hands raw from bleach and scrubbing. Still, it never seemed enough. Each payday vanished into bills. Food, electricity, the endless repairs the shack demanded. On her walk to the bus stop, she passed the same neighbors who whispered about her. Their driveways lined with shiny cars, their homes bright and polished. Some offered polite nods, but she caught the pity in their eyes, the way their gazes lingered on her thrift store shoes. That day at work, exhaustion dragged at her. She cleaned conference tables where executives had left crumbs from catered lunches worth more than her weekly groceries. She emptied bins overflowing with papers that still smelled of expensive perfume. Each task felt like another reminder that she lived on the outside of a world she could never touch. When she returned home, Lily was waiting on the porch, cheeks flushed from the cold. "Mom, the roof leaked again," she said softly. Emma smiled tiredly, brushing her daughter's cheek. "We'll fix it tomorrow." Somehow. But as night fell and the shack creaked under the wind, Emma lay awake staring at the patched ceiling. The laughter, the pity, the ache of endless struggle. They pressed down like the weight of the storm above. The next morning began like any other. Emma woke to the same damp smell, the same cracked walls. She wrapped Lily's lunch in brown paper, kissed her forehead, and walked her to the school bus stop. She had no idea that this day would break the pattern, that a stranger was about to cross her path and turn her world upside down. As she stepped back onto the dirt road, Emma saw him. A man standing near the shack, gazing at it with an expression she couldn't read. His clothes were simple but clean, his posture calm, as though he belonged there. Emma froze. "Can I help you?" she asked, wary. The man's eyes shifted to hers, and a faint smile touched his lips. "Maybe," he said, "or maybe I can help you." Emma's heart skipped, torn between suspicion and an odd flicker of hope. She didn't yet know that this stranger carried the key to a future no one, least of all her mocking neighbors, could have imagined. He didn't step closer, as if he knew that distance was a kind of respect. Emma stopped at the edge of the yard. Packed dirt, a stubborn strip of grass, the fence leaning like it shared her fatigue. The man nodded toward the roof. You've got a seam failing along the ridge. Wind drives the rain under it. She folded her arms, wary. I know. I brought tarp and nails, he said, lifting a canvas roll from the ground as if it weighed nothing. If you don't mind me climbing up, I can patch it before the next storm. People offered opinions, not work. People stared, rarely helped. Emma searched his face for pity and found only attention, the focused, practical kind. Why? She asked. He shrugged. Because it needs doing. Up close, he looked mid-40s, sun-browned, with the kind of quiet a person earns. His hands were calloused, a thin scar crossing one knuckle. He smelled faintly of cedar and rain. Name's Jacob. Emma, she said, then added, because the world had made her explain herself. I live here with my daughter. Jacob's gaze softened, then flicked to the bus rumbling down the road. Lily's face pressed to the window, her eyes widening when she saw the stranger in their yard. Emma raised a hand. Lily waved back before the bus turned the corner. Ladder? Jacob asked. Emma fetched one from behind the shack, the metal cold against her palms. She braced the feet while Jacob climbed. He moved with steady competence, setting the tarp, pinning corners, sealing seams as if he'd done this 100 times. When a nail bent, he smiled, unbothered, and pulled another from the pouch. You do this for a living? She called up. Sometimes, he said. Mostly I fix what I can, where I can. Took less than an hour. When he came down, the shack already felt different, less vulnerable, more like a place refusing to surrender. Emma's thanks caught in her throat. I can't pay much, she said. But I can make coffee. Coffee sounds good, he said. Payment enough. Inside, Emma cleared the table with quick sweeps, stacking bills under a chipped mug. The kettle hissed. She poured, slid a steaming cup toward him, and watched his eyes sweep the room. Not judging, simply taking inventory. The patched walls, the folded blankets, the lantern with a soot halo. How long have you been here? He asked. Since last spring. The words tasted like grit. It's what we had left. He nodded as if the story required no apology. You've kept it standing. Some days it feels like it keeps me standing. They drank in companionable quiet. When Jacob set his cup down, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a wrinkled flyer, local charity small print, a stamp across the top. Community Revitalization Initiative, pilot projects. He placed it between them. I do volunteer builds, he said. We patch roofs, reframe porches, sometimes replace whole walls if the bones are good. I scout sites before I propose them. He looked at the shack. Bones look good. Emma stared at the paper. The words leapt and blurred. Grants. Materials. Skilled crew. No cost to qualifying families. She felt something wild and impossible flutter in her chest. Then the practical voice cut in. Too many hoops. Too many people like your ex who make decisions in rooms you can't enter. What's the catch? She asked. Proof of residency. A safety inspection. One owner willing to lift a hammer with us. He tilted his head. You look like you can swing one. She huffed a small laugh. I can. Footsteps crunched outside. Two neighbors slowed, staring openly through the doorway. Curiosity like a spotlight. Emma's skin prickled. Jacob noticed. He shifted, blocking their view without making a show of it. The neighbors moved on. He tapped the flyer. I don't promise miracles, but I can promise a crew on Saturday if you'll let me bring them. We start with the roof and framing. Then insulation. Windows. By winter, this place could hold heat. Emma's hands shook. Saturday was 3 days away. Why us? She whispered. Jacob folded the flyer back into her palm. Because I've been where the world laughs and keeps walking. And because your roof was telling on you. The door swung open and Lily burst in, cheeks pink, backpack thumping. She froze when she saw Jacob, then looked to her mother. Emma offered a small smile. This is Jacob. He fixed the roof. Lily's eyes shone. Really? Thank you. She slipped her hand into Emma's. Mom, is he? Is he with one of those programs? Jacob answered gently, I am. But I need your mom's yes. Lily looked up at Emma, hope fighting through the careful caution of a kid who has learned not to expect too much. Please. Emma's fear listed all the reasons to say no. Disappointment, strings, the humiliation of being a project. But beneath it, something steadier rose. Pride that didn't have to mean isolation. She squeezed Lily's hand and met Jacob's eyes. Yes, she said. We'll try. Relief flickered across Jacob's face, quickly replaced by logistics. I'll file the site report tonight. If we're approved, a truck arrives at 8. Do you have somewhere to store your things during work? Emma glanced around at their few belongings. More memories than objects. We'll make it work. Jacob stood, slipping on his jacket. At the door, he paused. One more thing. Your property line. Do you know how far it runs behind the shack? Emma frowned. Not exactly. Just to the creek, I think. Why? He hesitated, as if weighing how much to say. Because something back there doesn't match the city records. An outbuilding collapsed, maybe. I saw it on an old survey. If it's yours, it might matter. Might matter. 2 words that tightened the air. Emma followed him onto the porch, heart ticking faster. How? Jacob's gaze slid toward the tree line where brambles tangled in shadow. Sometimes the map of a place hides what people forgot on purpose, he said. And sometimes that's where the luck is. He tipped his chin in farewell and headed down the path, leaving Emma with a flyer in her palm, a patched roof over her head, and a question pulling at the back acres like a thread. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Emma stood at the edge of the yard with a flashlight, its beam catching on thorns and broken fence posts. Somewhere beyond the brush, something waited. Rotted wood or a promise or both. She lifted the light higher, breath fogging in the cold. From the darkness came the faintest glint, like metal catching moonlight. She took 1 step forward, then another, and the ground beneath her gave a hollow sound she had never heard before. The beam of Emma's flashlight trembled as she pushed deeper into the brambles. Thorns tugged at her sleeves, the cold night air sharp in her lungs. She had lived here almost a year and never once stepped this far back on the property. To her, the shack was the whole world. But Jacob's words, sometimes the map hides what people forgot on purpose, echoed louder than the crickets. The ground dipped suddenly, and her boot struck something hollow. She crouched, sweeping away leaves until her fingers brushed splintered wood. Heart hammering, she cleared more debris, revealing the corner of a collapsed structure half swallowed by earth. Rusted hinges clung to what looked like a door or hatch. She pressed harder with the flashlight, its beam catching on a faint outline of metal embedded in the dirt. A shiver ran down her spine. This wasn't just an old shed. It was hidden deliberately. The next morning, she walked Lily to the bus stop, eyes heavy from a restless night. As the bus pulled away, Emma overheard neighbors across the street snickering. Still in that shack? She'll never crawl out of it. One whispered, loud enough to sting. Emma kept her chin high, but their laughter followed her like smoke. Back at the shack, she stared at the patch of land. Curiosity gnawed at her, louder than fear. With an old spade, she began to dig. Each thrust of metal into soil unearthed more rotten wood and corroded iron. By midday, her arms ached, but the outline of a buried door was clear. A rectangular hatch, reinforced with rusted metal bands. She sat back, sweat dampening her hairline despite the chill. "What are you hiding?" she whispered. When Jacob returned that afternoon to check the roof, she led him straight to the site. His brows rose. "You found it. It was right here the whole time," she said, voice hushed, as if speaking too loudly might wake something beneath. He knelt, running calloused fingers along the hatch. Old storm cellar, maybe, or storage. Could be nothing. Could be, Emma echoed, though neither of them believed it. Jacob fetched tools from his truck. Together they scraped away more dirt until the hatch groaned under their hands. At last, with a violent tug, it creaked open, a stale rush of air escaping like a sigh from the past. A narrow stairway descended into shadow. Emma's stomach clenched. I don't know if I can. You don't have to go alone, Jacob said. His flashlight cut through the dark, revealing stone walls slick with damp. They descended slowly, the air cooler with each step. At the bottom lay a small room, more intact than Emma expected. Shelves lined the walls, though many had collapsed. A table sat at the center, its surface littered with papers reduced to pulp. But in the far corner, a metal chest waited, its lid streaked with rust but unbroken. Emma's breath caught. She knelt, brushing dirt from the lock. It's sealed. Jacob leaned closer. And heavy. Whatever's in here. Someone wanted it kept safe. Her pulse raced. Safe from whom? That night, after Jacob left, Emma couldn't eat. She paced the shack, glancing at Lily, who colored at the table, oblivious. Should she tell her daughter what they'd found? Or was it better to protect her until she knew for sure? Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I know what's buried on that land. Careful who you trust. Emma's skin prickled. She looked out the window into the darkness beyond the fence, her chest tightening. Someone was watching. She turned back to Lily, forcing a smile. Bedtime, sweetheart. But her mind stayed on the chest in the cellar, on what it might contain, and on who else knew it was there. The next morning, she and Jacob pried harder at the chest. The lock screeched, metal snapping after years of rust. The lid shifted slightly, just enough for a sliver of air to escape. Emma's hands shook as she reached for the edge. Inside lay stacks of envelopes, each sealed with wax, and beneath them, something heavier wrapped in cloth. Emma lifted it carefully. The fabric fell away to reveal a box of polished wood, carved with initials she recognized instantly, her grandfather's. Her heart thundered, her breath shallow. What could he have hidden here, in the soil she'd nearly abandoned? She slid the lid open and froze, eyes wide. The polished box felt heavier than its size allowed. Emma held it as though it might vanish if she loosened her grip. Jacob steadied the flashlight, its beam quivering across her pale face. Go on, he said quietly. She drew a shaky breath and lifted the lid. Inside, rows of neatly bound documents rested, their paper yellowed but intact. On top lay a thick envelope with her name written in bold, slanted handwriting. Her grandfather's hand, no doubt about it. Her throat tightened. He had died years ago, leaving her only the shack. Or so she thought. Hands trembling, Emma tore open the envelope. A letter slipped out, its ink faded but legible. To Emma, if you are reading this, then life has brought you back here. This land is more than the shack. I could not trust others with its truth. Beneath this soil lies history, and perhaps your salvation. Protect it, and it will protect you. Her vision blurred. She blinked hard, continuing. The deeds in this box are yours. Use them well. Do not let greed strip what is meant for good. Jacob leaned in, eyes sharp. Deeds? Emma shuffled through the bundle. Property deeds. Multiple. Not just for the shack, but for acres. Land stretching beyond what she imagined, including parcels near the creek and fields that had long since gone wild. Oh my God, she whispered. He owned all of this, and no one ever told me. By afternoon, word had spread. Neighbors lingered at the fence line, whispering more loudly than usual. Mrs. Carver, the sharp-eyed widow across the road, called out, Find something interesting back there, Emma? Her tone dripped with curiosity wrapped in scorn. Emma's pulse quickened. Had someone seen her digging? Was the anonymous text connected? She forced a smile. Just clearing brush. Carver's lips pursed, unconvinced. Inside, Emma laid the deeds across the table. Lily stared wide-eyed. Mom, are we rich? Emma shook her head quickly. We're responsible. That's what we are. But inside, her heart raced with possibilities. Safety, stability, a future no one could laugh away. Jacob studied the papers. If these hold up in court, you own more than a shack. You own leverage. That night, Emma reread her grandfather's words, trying to draw strength from the faded ink. Yet fear gnawed at her. She remembered the text, Careful who you trust. The timing was too sharp to be coincidence. At dawn, she carried the deeds to the county office, Jacob driving her into town. The clerk, a bored young man, stamped through the files. Then his expression changed. He excused himself, disappeared into a back room, and returned with an older supervisor who scrutinized the papers. "These are legitimate," the supervisor said, surprise clear in his voice. "Some parcels haven't changed hands in decades. Miss, you're sitting on land developers have been circling for years." Emma's stomach lurched. "Developers?" The man nodded. "Big companies. They've been trying to buy out properties along the creek for expansion. If they know you own this—" He trailed off, but the warning was clear. Back at the shack, Emma barely had time to catch her breath before another envelope arrived. Hand-delivered this time. Inside was a typed letter. "We represent a consortium interested in acquiring your property. We can offer immediate payment above market value. Decline, and consequences may follow." Emma's hand shook as she read the last line twice. Consequences. Jacob swore under his breath. They already know. Emma folded the letter, her jaw tightening. "This isn't just about money. My grandfather wanted this land protected. If I sell, I betray him, and myself." Jacob studied her, admiration flickering in his eyes. "Then you'll need allies, because they won't back down." That night, another storm rolled in. Rain pounded the new tarp, thunder rattling the shack. Emma lay awake beside Lily, clutching the wooden box as though it might shield them. Every laugh from the neighbors, every whisper of gossip, every threat in those letters felt like walls closing in. And still, beneath it all, her grandfather's words echoed. "Do not let greed strip what is meant for good." At dawn, a sharp knock rattled the door. Emma froze, clutching Lily close. Jacob wasn't due until noon. She opened the door slowly. Standing on the porch was a man in a tailored coat, rain dripping from his brimmed hat. His smile was thin, rehearsed. "Ms. Reyes," he said smoothly, "I represent the consortium. It would be wise to reconsider our offer. For your sake, and your daughter's." Emma's blood ran cold. The man's polished shoes dripped rain onto the porch boards. Emma stood frozen in the doorway, her pulse thudding. Lily peeked from behind her, eyes wide. Emma shifted slightly to block her daughter from view. "I already said no," she managed, voice tight. The man's smile didn't falter. "No is often the first step to yes. Think carefully, Ms. Reyes. You live in a shack with a failing roof. We're offering you freedom, cash, security, a chance to start over." Jacob's truck pulled up just then, tires crunching gravel. Relief surged through Emma. He stepped out, his posture protective, jaw set. "She's not interested," he said firmly. The stranger tipped his hat, but his eyes lingered on Emma. "Offers expire, and consequences. Don't wait." Then he turned, coat flapping, and disappeared into the rain. Inside, Emma slammed the door and leaned against it, trembling. Lily clung to her. "Mom, what did he mean? Consequences?" Emma forced a smile, stroking her daughter's hair. "He just wants us to be scared. But we won't be." Jacob, watching her, said quietly, "They're pushing harder than I expected. We need proof stronger than deeds and a letter. Something they can't twist in court." Emma remembered her grandfather's box. She sifted through the documents again. Bills of sale, old maps, receipts. Then, at the very bottom, another sealed envelope, wax cracked with age. Her fingers shook as she opened it. Inside was a handwritten contract between her grandfather and the town council, dated nearly 50 years earlier. It detailed his condition for keeping the land untouched. Part of it was designated for community use only. Emma's breath caught. If this holds, they can't legally develop it. Jacob's eyes lit with cautious hope. This is leverage. But if they know you have it, they'll fight dirtier. That evening, neighbors gathered near the fence again. Mrs. Carver, arms crossed, called out, "What kind of deals are you making back there, Emma?" Men in fancy coats showing up, strangers digging in your yard. "It's a circus." Others muttered agreement, suspicion brewing. One man added, "If you've got something valuable, maybe it's time to share with the community. Don't hog what could benefit all of us." Emma's cheeks burned. This land was left to me to protect, not to sell to people who'll tear it apart. The crowd scoffed, their laughter sharp, like the first day she'd moved in. Only now it carried envy too. Later, Jacob returned with supplies. "You'll need more than words. If we rebuild this shack into something solid, something undeniable, they'll see you as more than a target." They worked late, hammering, sawing, patching walls under lantern light. Lily fetched nails, her eyes shining with pride. For the first time, the shack began to feel less like a symbol of shame and more like a fortress. But just as hope flickered, headlights swept across the yard. A car idled at the edge of the property, engine rumbling. Emma's stomach dropped. Jacob grabbed a flashlight, striding toward it. "Can I help you?" he called. The car reversed slowly, taillights glowing red before it sped off into the dark. Emma shivered. "They're watching us." The next morning, an official-looking envelope arrived by certified mail. Inside was a notice. The consortium had filed a petition to seize the land under eminent domain. Their claim: the shack and surrounding acres were unfit for habitation and posed a community hazard. Emma's hands shook as she read the words. "They're trying to take it all." Jacob slammed his fist against the table. "Then we fight. We take that contract, the deeds, everything, straight to the judge." Emma nodded, fear curling in her chest. But beneath it, a spark of fire. She had been laughed at, mocked, dismissed. But now she had something worth defending. As she packed the documents into a folder, a sharp knock rattled the door. She opened it to find two uniformed officers on the porch. One held a clipboard. "Ms. Reyes," he said, "we're here to inspect the property. We've had reports of unsafe conditions." Emma's stomach turned cold. Someone had set this in motion faster than she imagined. The officer stepped forward, eyes scanning the fragile walls of her home. "If we find violations, you and your daughter may have to vacate immediately." Emma clutched the folder tighter, her world spinning. The officers moved through the shack with clipboards, noting every crack, every leak, every loose board. Emma followed, her chest tight, Lily clutching her hand. One officer murmured to the other, "Unsafe, no insulation, weak foundation." Emma's heart sank, but she forced her voice steady. "This is my home. My grandfather left it to me. You can't just take it away." The taller officer sighed. "Ma'am, we don't make the rules. If the petition stands, the land could be seized." Before panic could take root, Jacob stepped forward, folder in hand. "Not if you see this." He placed the documents on the table, the deeds, the letter, and finally, the contract marked with the council's seal. The officers leaned over the faded ink. One of them read aloud, "This land, in perpetuity, shall include acreage set aside for community benefit and cannot be sold for private development without the heir's consent." They looked at each other, frowns deepening. "This changes things," one admitted. Emma's pulse quickened. "So you can't call it unfit if it's designated for community use, right?" "My grandfather made sure of that." The officer nodded slowly. "We'll have to report this. It's not what the petition claimed." Word spread quickly. Neighbors who had mocked her now gathered in stunned silence as Emma walked out with Jacob and the officers. The same voices that once laughed were hushed, eyes wide as if seeing her for the first time. Mrs. Carver crossed her arms, muttering, "So she really owns it." Emma stood tall, Lily's hand tight in hers. For once, she didn't shrink from their stares. She had proof. She had power. Later that week, the judge dismissed the consortium's petition, citing her grandfather's contract. The courtroom buzzed with whispers, but Emma only heard one voice. Her own, clear and strong as she told the judge she intended to honor the land's purpose. "Not for greed," she said, "but for community, for my daughter, for the future." With Jacob's help and volunteers from the revitalization program, the shack transformed. Walls were reinforced, a real roof raised, insulation laid. But Emma's vision reached beyond her own home. She set aside part of the land as her grandfather wished, building a small community garden and a safe gathering space. On opening day, families who once looked down on her now came carrying seedlings, tools, and warm smiles. Children ran laughing across the yard. Lily handed out baked goods she'd made with her mom in their new oven. The laughter that once mocked them now filled the air with joy. Emma stood on the porch, watching the garden take life, tears shining in her eyes. "We did it, Grandpa," she whispered. "We turned shame into strength." Jacob stepped beside her, handing her a mug of coffee. "You didn't just keep the land," he said. "You gave it back its soul." Emma looked at Lily, her daughter laughing in the sun, and felt a warmth stronger than any storm. Emma's story is proof. Being laughed at is not the end. It's the beginning of resilience. She was left with nothing, mocked for living in a shack, but with courage, truth, and determination, she built not only a home but a future. If this story touched you, hit subscribe, leave a comment about the moment that moved you most, and share this video with someone who needs hope today. Because sometimes the very place where people laugh at you becomes the ground where you rise.